Welcome to the deep dive. We are so glad you're here with us.
Glad to be here.
Today we are opening up a file that at first glance looks like a simple genealogy. You know, one of those lists of names that are hard to pronounce and ages that are just, well, hard to comprehend.
Right.
We're looking at Genesis chapters 4 and 5. But specifically, we are zooming in on a strange coincidence, or what seems like one. We're looking at two men who share the exact same name.
Lamech.
And it's one of those details that, I mean, if you're reading through Genesis quickly, you might just skim right over it.
Of course.
You see Lamech in chapter 4, you see Lamech again in chapter 5, and your brain just sort of categorizes them as that guy from the early Bible days. But they aren't the same man.
Not even close. Far from it. And that really is the mission of this deep dive. We aren't just doing a biography of two ancient figures. We are looking at a study of two completely different ways of being human.
Two different paths.
These two men, both named Lamech, serve as signposts pointing in opposite directions. I mean, one points toward a cliff and the other points toward a sanctuary. It's the way of Cain versus the way of Seth, really.
Exactly. We have sources here that lay this out as a tale of two lineages. On one side, you have the Lamech from the line of Cain. This is the path of, well, boasting, violence, and human achievement that is totally severed from God.
And on the other side,
Lamech from the line of Seth. And this is a very different path. It's the path of weary hope, of looking for comfort in God, and believing that grace is real even when the ground is hard and life is a struggle.
I think it's important we establish how we're reading this today. We have a lot of notes here on the grammatical historical method.
Right.
And for the listener who, might not be in seminary, that can sound a bit dry, but it's actually thrilling when you understand what it means.
It really is. It simply means we are reading the text on its own terms. We aren't treating these chapters as misty metaphors or, political allegories for some later kingdom.
No.
We are taking the text at face value. These were real families living in a real world, making real choices that had ripple effects for centuries.
We're looking at the grammar. What do the words actually mean? And the history, what was happening at the time, all to find the intent of the author.
And when you view it that way, these aren't just characters in a fable. They are, in a very real sense, our ancestors. They're dealing with the immediate aftermath of the fall.
And I think we really need to set that scene before we get to the men themselves. What does the world even look like in Genesis 4? It's so early.
That is the crucial context. Adam and Eve have been exiled, the gate to Eden is shut, the way back is barred, but, and this is so key, the creation mandate from Genesis 1 wasn't revoked.
That's a huge point.
It is. God told humanity to fill the earth and subdue it. That command is still active, so humans are still wired to build, to plant, to organize, and to create families.
But the conditions have changed dramatically.
Drastically. They were trying to fulfill that mandate under the curse. Genesis 3 tells us the ground would produce thorns and thistles, and that man would eat bread by the sweat of his brow.
So it's not a paradise anymore, it's a project.
Wow.
A hard one.
It is. So you have this rapid expansion of humanity, but it's happening in a friction-filled environment. It's hard. It's painful. And in response to that pain, we see civilization springing up very, very quickly.
The text mentions city building almost immediately, doesn't it, with Cain?
It does. It's not thousands of years of people wandering in loincloths. The source material highlights that we see craftsmen, households, herders, and city structures very early on.
It's happening fast.
And Acts 17.26 says God determines the appointed times and boundaries of people. So God is overseeing this expansion, even while sin is rampant. And running through this developing society are these two distinct rails, you could call them, or lines of descent.
Okay, let's talk about those rails, because the Bible really does structure this visually for us. It's not just a random collection of names.
Imagine two train tracks running parallel through history. The first rail is Cain's line.
The one that starts with the first murder?
Yes, it goes Adam, then Cain, then Enoch, different Enoch, then Irad, Mehujael, Methusael, and then it stops. It stops at Lamech.
And if you count the generations there, starting with Adam as the first, Lamech is the seventh.
He is the seventh from Adam through Cain. And in biblical numerology, the number 7 often signifies completion or fullness or even perfection.
But this isn't a good kind of perfection.
No, it's an ironic perfection.
Yeah.
Lamech represents the fullness of the worldly way. He is the fully developed fruit of what Cain started. Cain started with a murder in a field. Lamech perfects the attitude behind it and sings about it.
Okay, so that's the first rail. What about the second one?
The second rail is Seth's line. Adam has another son, Seth, to replace Abel. And that line goes Adam, Seth, Enosh. And it keeps going. Eventually we hit Enoch, then Methuselah, and then our second Lamech.
And this Lamech, the one from Seth's line, becomes the father of Noah.
A father of Noah,
Yeah.
the one who will be saved through the flood.
It's so interesting to compare the sevenths in each line. We said in Cain's line, the seventh man is this violent Lamech. But in Seth's line, who is the seventh...
That's a great question, and the book of Jude actually points this out for us. Jude 14 calls Enoch the seventh from Adam.
The one who walked with God.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in generation 7 on the Seth side, you have Enoch, a man who walked with God and was taken up without seeing death, a prophet of righteousness.
And in generation 7 on the Cain side.
You have Lamech, a man who walked with pride and dealt out death. The contrast is literally built into the structure of the genealogy itself. It's unavoidable.
So it really shows that these aren't just lists of names to skip over to get to the good parts.
I know.
The structure itself is an argument. It's showing us two ways to respond to the trauma of the fall to life outside the garden.
Precisely. And that response isn't just, philosophical. It shows up in how they handle their most intimate relationships. We absolutely have to talk about marriage.
This is one of the very first things we learn about the Cainite Lamech, isn't it?
It is. Genesis 4.19, a short, sharp sentence. Lamech married 2 women.
It just stands out.
It's a jarring sentence if you've been following the narrative flow from Genesis 2. Up until this point, the pattern established in the garden was one man, one woman. The two shall become one flesh. Lamech is the first man in recorded history to break that mold. He takes 2 wives, Ada and Zillah.
It feels like a power move more than just a relationship choice.
It is absolutely a power move. It's a move toward accumulation. In the ancient world, and honestly in the human heart, there is a tendency to view people as commodities. If you have power, you accumulate resources. You accumulate cattle. You accumulate land.
And here, Lamech is applying that to women.
Yes, he is taking, the text uses that word. It's a consumption mindset rather than a covenant mindset. He's building his own little empire, starting in his own tent.
So meanwhile, what is happening on the other rail? Is Seth's line doing the same thing?
The text suggests a completely different focus. Right around the time these cultural shifts are happening in Cain's line, Genesis 4.26 says, regarding Seth's family, at that time people began to call on the name of the Lord.
Wow, that's a stark difference.
Isn't it? One group is accumulating wives and building clout.
And the other group is starting prayer meetings.
That's a great way to put it. And that is the central tension. While Lamech is redefining marriage to suit his lust or his power, the Sethite line is discovering corporate worship. They are realizing that the answer to the thorns and thistles isn't to grab more for yourself, but to call out to the Creator.
And this all plays out under the shadow of that first promise, the proto-evangelium.
Yes, exactly. Genesis 3.15, the promise that the offspring of the woman would one day come and crush the serpent's head. Every generation after that had to decide, are we waiting for God's promise, or are we making our own paradise now?
Are we trusting, or are we taking? That seems to be the core question.
That's it. And these 2 Lamechs give us 2 very different answers.
So let's dig deeper into the Cainite Lamech's world. Because, if you looked at his family from a purely secular economic perspective, they were crushing it. They were incredibly successful.
They were the titans of their industry. Without a doubt, the text lists Lamech's children, and it's basically a who's who of cultural fathers. He has Jabal, Jubal, and Tubal-Cain. These aren't just random kids. They are innovators.
Let's break them down, because the implications of their industries are huge. Start with Jabal.
Okay, Jabal. He's called the father of those who live in tents and raise livestock.
So he's a rancher.
On a massive scale. Remember, his ancestor Cain was a city builder. But Jabal seems to invent large-scale nomadic herding. This implies immense wealth. In the ancient Near East, wealth was measured in herds. And to manage massive herds, you have to move them.
So you need portable architecture tents.
Exactly. This is the domination of space. He's mastering the land for economic gain, agritech, you might call it.
Okay, then you have his brother, Jubal.
Jubal. He is the father of all who play stringed and wind instruments. The harp and the flute? This is the birth of the arts.
Which tells us something about their society.
It tells us a lot. It means they have leisure time. You don't invent complex musical instruments if you're starving to death, scratching at the dirt 16 hours a day. It implies a level of surplus, of stability.
And it also implies the power to shape culture emotionally. Music is powerful.
Incredibly powerful. And then we have the son of his second wife, Zillah, Tubal-Cain.
One who forged all kinds of tools out of bronze and iron. This one feels big.
This is the game changer, metallurgy. If you can forge bronze and iron, you have better plowshares? Yes, that helps with the curse. But you also have better swords, you have spear tips, you have armor. This is the birth of advanced technology.
And notice all of this, agritech, the arts, heavy industry, it's all coming from the line of Cain.
Yes, from the line of the murderer.
That is a detail that I think often troubles people. Why are the bad guys the ones inventing all the cool stuff?
It's a profound theological point about the image of God. Theologians call this common grace.
Unpack that for us.
Even though Cain's line was in rebellion against God, they were still human. They still bore the imago Dei, the image of God. That drive to create, to build, to subdue the earth, to unlock the secrets of the material world, to create beauty, that is God-given.
So sin doesn't just erase that.
It twits the heart, but it doesn't delete the capacity for genius. God's grace is common in that he gives these gifts of skill and intellect to all humanity, not just believers.
So the Bible isn't anti-technology or anti-art.
Not at all. But it is issuing a massive warning. It's showing us that cultural advancement can happen at the exact same time as moral collapse. You can have the most advanced metallurgy in the world and use it to kill your neighbor more efficiently.
You can have the most beautiful music.
And use it to sing songs of vengeance.
Which is exactly what Lamech does.
It is. We have to look at this poem in Genesis 4, verses 23 and 24. It's also called the Song of the Sword. Lamech gathers his wives, Ada and Zillah. They are his audience. And he performs this piece of poetry for them.
Ada and Zillah, listen to me. Wives of Lamech, hear my words. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for injuring me.
Just analyze the swagger there, the sheer arrogance. He demands their attention. Listen to me. And then he confesses to a killing. But he doesn't frame it as a tragedy or a mistake. He frames it as a boast. I killed a man for wounding me.
Some people might read that and say, well, maybe it was self-defense. He was wounded.
That's a fair question. But the Hebrew poetry suggests something much darker. The parallelism, a man for wounding me, a young man for injuring me, it emphasizes the disproportionate nature of his response.
How so?
The word for young man or boy can imply someone significantly younger or weaker. And the word for wound can just mean a bruise or a strike. Lamech is essentially saying, some kid scuffed me up, so I ended him. It is the celebration of escalation. He's bragging about his overreaction.
And then he brings God, or at least God's history with Cain, into it. He says, if Cain is avenged 7 times, then Lamech 77 times.
This is the absolute climax of his arrogance. Remember Cain? After Cain killed Abel, he was terrified. He cried out to God, everyone who sees me will kill me. He pleaded for mercy.
And God gave it to him in a way.
He did. In a mysterious act of grace, God put a mark on Cain and said, if anyone kills Cain, vengeance will be taken on him 7-fold. That was God's decree to limit blood feuds, to put a break on revenge.
But Lamech twists it completely.
Lamech usurps God's role. He doesn't ask for God's protection. He looks at the bronze sword in his hand, the sword maybe forged by his own son Tubal-Cain, and he says, I don't need God to protect me. I can protect myself, and my protection is better.
God promised 7. I promised 77.
Exactly. He is mocking the divine order. He's declaring himself the supreme judge and executioner. He's taken the technology of his son and the music of his other son and wrapped them together into a liturgy of self-worship.
This is the way of Cain, fully matured.
Pride, armed with technology, justifying violence.
And the scary part is, in a worldly sense, this works. Lamech was probably the most feared and powerful man of his age.
Oh, absolutely. Who is going to argue with a guy who has the iron weapons and the stated policy of using them 77 times over for a mere scratch? This attitude leads directly to the state of the world in Genesis 6, just before the flood, where the text says the earth was filled with violence. Lamech is the poster child for that era.
So that's one rail, a very dark one, and it ends in a crash. Now we have to switch tracks and look at the Sethite Lamech, and the transition in the text itself is, well, it's quite noticeable.
It is. We move from the poetry and the frenetic activity of Cain's line into the stately, solemn rhythm of Genesis 5. This chapter is a graveyard with a cadence.
The drum beat, he lived, he fathered, and he died, over and over.
It's a heavy drum beat, isn't it? It just pounds home the reality of the curse. It reminds us over and over that the wages of sin is death.
It does, but then, as you said, the rhythm breaks.
The camera stops. We get to the end of the line, to the Sethite Lamech in verses 28 and 29. And for the first time in this entire list, we get a window into a father's heart. We hear him speak.
He names his son Noah.
Noah, in Hebrew, Noach. And it sounds very much like the word for rest or relief or comfort.
And he doesn't just name him. He prophesies over him. He gives the reason for the name.
Yes, and listen to these words so carefully. He says, "He will comfort us in the labor and painful toil of our hands caused by the ground the Lord has cursed."
There is just so much pain in that single sentence.
Isn't there? This is why we needed to set the context of the thorns and sweat earlier. The Sethite Lamech isn't singing about how great he is. He isn't boasting about his kills. He is looking at his hands, calloused, bleeding, clared hands.
He's living the curse.
He is feeling the weight of the curse every single day. He admits that life is painful toil.
It's a confession of brokenness. The Cainite Lamech denies the brokenness by asserting his power.
Yes.
The Sethite Lamech embraces the reality of the brokenness and looks for help from outside himself.
That is the absolute key difference. One is arrogance, the other is dependence. Lamech of Seth looks at his newborn son and sees a glimmer of hope. He says, "This one, maybe this one will bring us comfort."
He connects his daily struggle with the dirt to the spiritual promise of God.
He does. He believes that God has not abandoned them to the thorns forever. He believes comfort is coming.
It's a profound act of faith to bring a child into a world like that and name him Rest.
It's a profound act of defiance against despair. He is saying, the curse is heavy, but God is good, and he will act. And of course, he was right.
That God did use Noah.
He did. In an immediate sense, Noah became the agent of preservation. When the violence of the Cainite line reached its peak and God decided to wash the world clean, Noah was the ark builder. He was the one who preserved humanity and the animal kingdom. He brought rest in the sense that he carried life through the judgment.
There's a fascinating numerical parallel here too, isn't there? We talked about the Cainite Lamech and his boast of 77.
Yes, the Bible loves to do this. It links things with numbers so we don't miss the comparison. The Cainite Lamech boasted of 77-fold vengeance, an escalation of sins.
So what about the Sethite Lamech?
Look at Genesis 5, verse 31. It gives his total lifespan. Altogether, Lamech lived a total of 777 years, and then he died.
Wow, 777.
3 sevens. In the face of Cainite Lamech's boast of 77-fold sin, the godly Lamech is given a lifespan of triple perfection. It suggests that God's plan is complete, that it overrides man's plan.
It suggests that the line of faith, though it looks weaker, I mean, they aren't building cities or forging swords, they're just
Buying and hoping.
is actually the line that possesses the fullness of life in God's eyes.
It's the paradox of the gospel showing up right there in Genesis. The meek inherit the earth. The proud are washed away.
Exactly. The man with the sword perished in the flood. The man with the hope became the father of the remnant.
This brings us to the theological significance of this whole study. We're really looking at two different definitions of success, two ways of life.
We are, and it's a tension we still live with every single day. We can call it the tension between common grace and human depravity.
Let's unpack that for a minute.
Okay, so as we saw, God allows the ungodly to flourish in many ways. You mentioned common grace.
Right. Matthew 5.45 says God sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. That means the Cainites of our world, people who don't know God or have no interest in him, will often be the ones inventing the internet or curing diseases or making the best movies or composing beautiful music.
And Christians can sometimes get defensive about that, can't we? Or even jealous.
We can. We might think, why do they get to be the successful ones? But the lesson from Lamech is that gifts are dangerous. When you have immense talent like Jubal with his music or Tubal Cain with his metalworking, but you have a heart that is disconnected from the giver of those gifts, they inevitably turn inward.
They become tools for idolatry and violence.
The gift without the giver destroys the recipient. That's a good way to say it. Technology is a magnifier. If your heart is full of pride, technology amplifies that pride into global destruction. If your heart is full of hate, a bronze sword lets you kill more people than a rock does.
So the Sethite way isn't necessarily to reject the technology, but to reject the spirit behind its use.
Right. We don't have to live in caves and be anti-art. Remember, Noah used technology. He built an ark. That's a marvel of ancient engineering. But he built it in obedience, not in arrogance.
I want to circle back to something you mentioned in the intro because it feels like the whole story hinges on it, the 77 connection. You said there's a moment in the New Testament where this gets turned completely on its head.
This is, for me, the most powerful takeaway from this entire deep dive. We have to fast forward thousands of years to the time of Jesus.
To the Gospel of Matthew.
Yes, Matthew 18. Peter approaches Jesus, and he's trying to be a good guy, a righteous student. He asks, "Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? up to 7 times.
And in that culture, forgiving 3 times was considered generous. So Peter's doubling that and adding 1 for good measure. He thinks he's being a superstar of mercy.
He does. He fully expects a gold star. But Jesus looks at him and says, I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times.
Some translations say 70 times 7.
Right, the numbers can be read either way, but the point is the same, and the echo is undeniable.
The ears of the Jewish listeners in that crowd would have perked up instantly.
They would have been ringing. They knew the Torah. They knew the story of Genesis. They knew the song of Lamech.
The song of ultimate revenge.
I will be avenged 77 times. Jesus picks up that exact number, the very emblem of infinite human revenge, and he claims it for infinite divine forgiveness.
That is radical. It's complete reversal.
It is the complete moral inversion of the world's system. Lamech says, if you hit me, I will hit you back forever. Jesus says, if they hit you, you must forgive them forever.
He is undoing the curse of Lamech. He's rewriting the song.
He is the anti-Lamech.
Yeah.
He is taking the spiral of violence, where blood leads to more blood, wound leads to greater wound, and he is stopping it dead with a spiral of grace. He replaces the sword with the cross. He absorbs the wound rather than inflicting it.
That changes everything about how we apply this to our lives. Because we don't carry bronze swords, but we definitely carry grudges.
We certainly do. And this is where the rubber meets the road. We can identify the spirit of Lamech in our own hearts very, very easily.
So what does that look like today in 2026?
It looks like the arithmetic of revenge. Someone hurts you. Maybe it's a spouse, a coworker, a neighbor, someone online. And instantly, the calculator in your brain starts running. They insulted me. That cost them 10 points. I need to do something that cost them 20 points back.
We want to win the conflict. We have to have the last word.
We want to win and we want to dominate. Lamech didn't just want to be equal. He wanted to be 77 times superior. In a marriage, this is deadly. It's the sarcastic comment that digs up the past. It's the silent treatment designed to punish. That is the way of Cain, the way of Lamech.
So the way of Seth, the way of Jesus, is to break the math.
It's to throw away the calculator entirely. The new math is injury plus grace equals forgiveness.
Now, we should probably clarify. This doesn't mean we ignore abuse or that there are no consequences for crime.
Not at all. The Bible is very clear about establishing civil government and justice for that. This is about our personal posture, our hearts. In our interpersonal relationships, the call is to stop the escalation.
A soft answer turns away wrath, as Proverbs says.
Exactly. When you choose not to send that biting text message back, that is an act of spiritual warfare against the spirit of Lamech. When you choose to absorb a slight and pray for the person instead of gossiping about them, you are walking the line of Seth.
And it is so much harder than the Lamech way. The Lamech way feels good in the moment. It feels powerful.
It feels like strength, but it is actually profound weakness. It's a slavery to impulse and pride. The Seth way looks weak. It looks like losing the argument. But it requires immense strength. It requires the strength of Christ in us.
Let's also talk about the application of hope as well. I keep thinking about the Sethite Lamech naming his son Rest when the ground was still hard.
That is such a challenge to us. We often wait for our circumstances to get better before we start hoping. We say, once I get that job, or once the diagnosis changes, or once the kids are behaving, then I'll praise God. Then I'll have hope.
But Lamech didn't wait for the curse to be lifted.
No. He looked at the thorns, literal thorns in his field, and he made a declaration of faith over his son. He planted a seed of hope right in the middle of a drought. We need to be people who name our children Noah in a metaphorical sense.
What does that look like?
When the headlines are terrifying, when the economy is shaking, when your family is in turmoil, we need to be the ones who say, God is still on the throne. Comfort is coming.
We need to steward our culture with that same hope too, going back to the arts and technology.
Yes. If you're a musician, an engineer, a coder, a carpenter, you are walking in the footsteps of Jabal and Jubal and Tubal-Cain in terms of your God-given skill. But you have a choice. Who do you work for?
Are you building a monument to yourself or a sanctuary for others?
That's the question. Is your technology serving the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life? Or is it serving the love of God and neighbor? The guitar isn't evil. The algorithm isn't evil. A hammer isn't evil. But they must be redeemed. They must be submitted to the lordship of Christ.
And finally, we have to touch on the marriage aspect again. Lamech's polygamy was the beginning of the breakdown of the family. It was linked to his pride.
It was. He treated vows as optional and people as collectible. And the Christian counterculture to that today is simply faithfulness.
Monogamy itself is countercultural now.
It is radical to say to one person, I am yours and you are mine until death parts us, and to actually fight for that covenant when it gets hard. When every other voice is telling you to seek your own happiness, that shines like a lighthouse in a dark place.
It tells a story.
It shows the world that God is a covenant-keeping God. When we keep our promises in the home, we are telling the truth about the gospel.
It really is a comprehensive picture, isn't it? These 2 chapters in Genesis cover everything. Work, war, marriage, art, and worship.
It's the DNA of the whole biblical story. 2 seeds, 2 ways, 2 cities.
The city of man and the city of God.
One is loud, impressive, technologically advanced, violent, and ultimately doomed. The other is quiet, prayerful, often suffering, and eternal.
So the invitation for the listener today is what?
The invitation is to check your location. Which rail are you riding? Are you on the path of self-vindication, the path of I'll get what's mine, I'll pay them back? Or are you on the path of God be merciful to me, a sinner?
Because the Sethite line didn't end with Noah, did it?
No. It kept going. It survived the flood. It went through Abraham, through David, all the way to a manger in Bethlehem. The hope of Lamech, that one will come to bring us comfort, was ultimately fulfilled in Jesus.
He is the true rest.
He is one who takes the curse of the thorns, literally wearing them as a crown on his head, so that the cursed ground of our hearts could finally be healed and made new.
That's beautiful.
I want to leave our listeners with the words of that Savior. If you are feeling the painful toil that Lamech felt, if you are tired of the violence of the world or the violence in your own heart, just listen to this invitation from Matthew 11, verses 28 to 30.
Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light.
He is the Noah we have all been waiting for. He is the true comfort. May you find your true rest in him this week, knowing that while the world may boast and rage, the Lord comforts his people. Grace and peace to you.
Amen to that.